Innovation, disruption, and big issues. This is Business Game Changers with Sarah Westall.
Welcome to Business Game Changers. I'm Sarah Westall. With all the hits going on now against political figures and against the media, different personalities, I wanted to bring on a political hitman, and I'm going to bring on Stephen Marks. He wrote the book, Confessions of a Political Hitman, and he's going to dive into what he did when he was a hitman for major campaigns. He worked for most of the presidential campaigns before this one. And he also worked for a lot of governor, even city council campaigns he'd worked for. So he's going to dig some dirt up on what really happened going on. And I got to warn you, this conversation gets really heated on both of our parts. And I'm trying to get information out of him, and it was difficult at times. But he's not as bad of a guy as he was made out to be in the public eye for being a political hitman. He now is devoting his life to working with Alzheimer's patients and really promoting that cause. And he realized that being all negative wasn't the best thing for him. But it got pretty nasty, this conversation. And so I just want to warn you on that. And I'm more of an independent. I'm looking for people who are great people. And I care more about where they are and where they're thinking as a person, and less necessarily where they think they are on the political spectrum, because a lot of times once they get down to doing the right thing, good people tend to do the same things no matter what party they're from. You might have different policy agendas, but right now we have so many issues that are much broader than partisan issues that I think most people will come together on most of the majority of issues we have, as long as they're ethical, good-minded people aiming to do the right things and have the courage to withstand all the blackmail and all the crap that people are dealing with. And so let's just get into my interview now with Stephen Marks. Hi, Stephen. Welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great timing. I just, there's so much going on in the political landscape, especially with your area, the whole hit pieces that are happening right now. You wrote a book called The Confessions of a Political Hitman, and you call yourself a political hitman. It's something that you've been involved with for a large chunk of your life. Can you tell me what a political hitman is?
Well, it's not to be taken literally. We're not going out there killing people or shooting people. It has to do with negative campaigning and what's called opposition research. Opposition research is a euphemism for digging up dirt on not only on your opponent, you have to do it on your own candidate as well, so you know where you're going to get hit. And so the book publisher thought Political Hitman was a good kind of way to go about it. Although I'm not out there killing people, although I am a hitman using their own words, their own votes, negative things they've done against them. So anybody that deals in opposition research, and every campaign has somebody doing this, every campaign committee, the RNC, the DNC, every state Republican Party, every state Democratic Party has somebody doing opposition research. I just wanted to add, when my book came out 10 years ago, the expression opposition research was political hacks like myself knew what it meant, but it was never used, the media never used that word. And because of my book, you hear it used every day now. It's now like it's a euphemism. In fact, most like if you call the DNC or the RNC or any campaign, they don't even call it opposition research. They just call it research, make it sound very innocent and benign. But that's basically what it is. It's getting the negative material on your opponent. That's our job. Then we give it to the pollsters. You say you find 10 what we call hits, 10 bad things. He voted for tax increases. He's soft on crime. He had, an affair or whatever. They poll the 8 or 10 hits that we give them. And the ones that the people think are the worst, the 2 or 3, those are the ones that they use in the ads that they put out against the person, the ones that the people react to. And we're always very surprised at things that people do care about and don't care about. Obviously, the sexual stuff doesn't matter anymore. Being gay doesn't matter anymore. That was a big deal back in the 90s when I started. But that stuff really isn't, of any use these days. People don't care about that.
Well, Roger Stone is called a hitman. So would you put yourself in the category of what Roger Stone is and does?
Yes, Sarah, I've worked with Roger, and he's a good guy. He's like me and goes back and forth between New York and Florida. But yeah, he's more of a consultant who does everything. He doesn't restrict himself to opposition research, whereas that's pretty much. Although I've done some campaigns where I've done more. I also do a lot of media work, doing the commercials which use the opposition research. But Roger is a very smart political person, goes way back to Nixon's administration, and opposition research is just one part of what he does, which is whereas with me, it's most of what I do.
Well, you now work on Alzheimer's, people who suffer from Alzheimer's disease, and you created an organization called Alzheimer's Lives Matter. Why did you leave the profession? It seems like you had kind of a change of heart and wanted to do something that was more meaningful.
You're right, Sarah. Doing opposition research, you get mired in this doing negativity, and you get very disillusioned, and is this what I really want? Whereas what we're doing now to help Alzheimer's victims get more money spent for Alzheimer's research by Congress and by the NIH, I'm finally doing for the first time something positive. If you go back past 20 years or so and you looked at how much money the federal government allocates for Alzheimer's research versus other illnesses like cancer, HIV, leukemia, etc., it's a complete joke. And I mean, just the last few years they have given it bigger bumps, but it's still far, far less and totally underfunded. And unlike cancer and HIV and leukemia, which at least have treatments, we have nothing. My mom has Alzheimer's. They give her a tranquilizer. That's it. Forget about a cure. We don't even have an effective treatment. In some other countries, they're maybe on the verge of getting something, but we don't know. Bigger problem, not a bigger problem, but equally as big a problem is as we baby boomers become seniors, if there's not any kind of effective treatment for Alzheimer's in another 10 or 20 years, Medicare and Medicaid will go bankrupt. And so our group, we are partnering with the Alzheimer's Association. We're called Alzheimer's Lives Matter. We are raising money that it goes either directly for research grants to the teaching hospitals to help find a cure or treatments, and it's also part of it is going to lobby Congress to spend more money in the next fiscal year 18 budget for research. I just want to say Congress has actually been very good on this. The stonewalling we get is from the NIH. They're the ones that keep fighting us, and we're hoping that they'll change their mind. We're also going to lobby President Trump to help us out. We already have several members of Congress, such as Senator Schumer and Alcee Hastings down here in Florida, who are very, very supportive of us. And we're going to get more people on board. It's not even a bipartisan issue. It's a nonpartisan issue. We've polled this, and over 90% of the public agrees that more money should be spent on this because everybody knows somebody, or even if they don't, they realize that it's just a problem where, like I said, those other illnesses, they have treatments. Alzheimer's victims are doomed. Many people have beat cancer, beat HIV, beat leukemia. Not one person ever has beat Alzheimer's.
Well,
so
it's kind of a disease of the old, and they don't really. It's an attitude, I guess. And yeah. I want to get back into this, but if you don't mind, I want to talk a little bit more about your political hitman stuff, and then we can get back into your Alzheimer's cause, which I think is really important. My grandmother died of Alzheimer's disease.
I just want to mention real quickly, please, if I may. Our organization is alzheimerslivesmatter.org online. If people want to see what we're doing, and if they want to make a contribution to help us, Alzheimer's, that's without the apostrophe, just the word alzheimerslivesmatter.org. It's a 501c3, which means any contribution is tax deductible. We are like I said, we're partnering with the Alzheimer's Association. We're going to do everything we can to stop this travesty and this monstrosity. Every society can be based on how they treat their senior citizens. And America has just been an embarrassment on the subject. And we're hoping to fix that.
Well, I could tell it really matters to you a lot, which is great, which shows that you've changed who you are. But I really want to get into the political hitman stuff because there's so much that's going on now, and I think the landscape has changed a lot. So I'm hoping we can dive way into it. What campaigns were you part of back in the day? Can you share some of that? Because you were involved in a lot of major campaigns, a lot of presidential campaigns and so forth.
First, I'll say that I've created super PACs that put out ads against, going back to 2000. So we put out, as you know, with super PAC ads, you can't say anything positive. You can't say vote for candidate X, but you can say these are the negative things about candidate Y. That's because of the McCain-Feingold bill. So I did some of those hard-hitting ads against Al Gore, against John Kerry, and against Barack Obama. And also I've worked on races from local all the way to presidential. I started in 94. I worked for the NRCC, National Republican Congressional Committee. That was when we took over Congress with the Gingrich Republican Revolution. Took over Congress for the first time since, I think, sometime in the 1920s. And in that race, the freshmen that came out of that race, we won 53 seats. Many of them now are senators, like, for instance, Richard Burr of North Carolina, Roger Wicker of Mississippi. My mind is just going blank for a second, but we elected guys. Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, and I don't know if you remember, Sonny Bono was actually in that class from California, and also Mark Sanford from South Carolina, who's now, well, he was governor. Now he's a congressman again. But we elected some pretty high-profile people that year. Also, J.C. Watts from Oklahoma, and that year, I did most of the southern states where they had either a Democratic incumbent who was vulnerable or it was an open seat. And for the first time since the Civil War in 94, because Clinton was unpopular during his first off-year election, for the first time we won seats in the South that were always hardcore Democratic seats going back to the Civil War. So it started then, and since then I've done a lot of statewide races. Here in Florida, where I live, I've done races. We get hired generally by the campaign or by a PAC or by the media person, very rarely directly by the candidate, but sometimes. And here in Florida, I did work on behalf of Marco Rubio, Charlie Crist, who was governor for a while, current governor Rick Scott, and the current Attorney General Pam Bondi. And it's just so many names. But like I said, I've done everything from city council races all the way up to presidential races. Because believe it or not, in the city council races across the country, there's a lot of money in those city councils that get spent. And those races are just as interesting to work on as the presidential races. But obviously, the most important ones are, I like to think that my ads did help in 2000 defeat Al Gore because it was such a close race. In 2004, defeat John Kerry because that was such a close race. In 2008 and 2012, we didn't defeat Barack Obama because the banks crashed 6 weeks before the election in 2008. If you remember, McCain was actually ahead. And I put out an ad where he was mocking and ridiculing the Bible. This is Barack Obama. And it was very effective until, unfortunately, like I said, the banks crashed. And what happens when the country gets thrown into a recession, people blame whoever the party is in power. So Bush was president at the time, and so people want to change, just like Trump got elected because people want to change.
Well, and that's me. I mean, I'm more of an independent. I don't really take one side or the other. I'm looking at, I'm just looking for the best ideas. I want people who think independently. I mean, I'm pretty clear when I talk about where I'm at, because I think there's good people in all parties. But what happens is the deep state and other people get involved and they get sucked into the system. So when you were doing your work, how did the deep state get involved? And, how did they get involved and how did they affect things? Or did you not work at that level?
Well, can you first tell me what exactly is deep state?
Well, deep state is a really popular, term that has been coined as far as with deep state are the people who are in power behind the scenes that are controlling the elections, controlling government, and keeping things the status quo. And it was originally termed by Professor Dale Scott of, where does he's out in the West Coast. one of the colleges out in the West Coast. And so Berkeley, I think he's from Berkeley. Peter Dale Scott from Berkeley. And that's what was originally, and it came from the Kennedy years when Kennedy was assassinated and the deep state was behind his assassination. And that's what everybody believes. And so the deep state has a lot of power. People who have powers that aren't necessarily...
Assassinated John Kennedy? The mafia assassinated John Kennedy.
Well, this isn't a Kennedy interview. I mean, my point isn't that, but they think that's where the term was coined.
To answer your question, very rarely do we opposition researchers get involved with them. We're hired either by the campaign or sometimes by the state party or sometimes by a special interest group like the NRA or different pro-life groups or anti-tax groups, Cato Institute, or by the campaign's pollster or by the campaign's media person. Now, sometimes we do deal with the candidates directly if they're running for the first time and they're not known yet. But if they're already in there, we generally never really deal with them personally. We deal with the people that are around them. And I just want to back up and say one last thing about opposition research and negative campaigning. If you go back to every presidential election since Lyndon Johnson, most presidents got elected not because they liked that person, but they wanted to change. It was a negative against the person in power. Richard Nixon got elected because people were sick of Lyndon Johnson and the Vietnam War. People elected Jimmy Carter because they were sick of the Republicans in Watergate. People elected Ronald Reagan. People got to love Ronald Reagan by 84, but in 80 he was strictly a protest vote against Jimmy Carter, who was such a disaster. And then Bill Clinton was elected in 92 because George Bush #1 threw us into a recession in his last year when he raised taxes. And then, of course, you go on to W was elected because we had what was called Clinton fatigue. Even though he had 2 terms and he did a decent job as president, there was so much scandal and so much people just sick of all of it. That's how W got elected. And then, of course, Obama got elected also, not because people liked Obama. They want to change from W because of Iraq. So if you and the biggest example is Donald Trump. People didn't vote for Donald Trump; they voted for change. And Hillary boxed herself into a corner in the convention, because the Sanders people. She said, "I'm going to be a third party of Obama," and so clearly she wasn't for change, and the only person that was for change was Donald Trump. So that's how most elections, I'm not saying most, but at least half of them are decided not because they like a certain candidate, but they want to get rid of somebody else.
Well, you claim that political hitmen are the ones that really define the elections. And can you elaborate a little bit more into this? I mean, I suppose you just got done doing that. And is that all coming from you, the strategy and so forth coming from the political hitman? Or does the strategy come from the campaign telling you what to do?
Yeah, we have once we give them the opposition research, we have really nothing to do after that. They decide what they do is, like I said, we give them, say 10 what we call hits, 10 negative things against the candidate. And by the way, we do opposition research on our own people as well, so we know where we're going to get hit. We give them 10 things, like he raised taxes, he's soft on crime, etc. He's with more welfare spending, whatever. And they poll those 10 things, and they find the 2 or 3 that people are most offended by, and those are the ones they make ads out of. And we're always surprised at the stuff that people don't care about and the things that people do care about. But the pollsters are the ones that figure that out, and then it goes to the ad people that make an ad based on that as well.
Well, how do you think the negative ads have changed the games? Changed the political landscape? Because I for one hate seeing negative ads. Now it just seems like this big dirty game. I think it's like in hyperdrive compared to what it used to be.
Well, 2 responses. Number 1, everybody claims they hate it. But then when they see an ad that says Governor so-and-so raised your taxes 500 times or so-and-so had sex with his receptionist, they vote against them. So people complain about it, but it works if you can make your case. And by the way, nothing we give them, it has to be cleared by the networks. We can't put false allegations in there. It has to be true. And as long as you're educating people as to the truth, I don't see why it's negative or wrong. If we can only have positive, Sarah, if we can only have positive ads, then what's the difference between us and Cuba or North Korea?
But you have to admit now, maybe back then the things were factual. I think now it seems like everything's fair game, and they take things and spin it totally. Like, for example, in my own district, there was Jason Lewis ran, and he said on air, he was talking about slavery as an example of how that you can't have no laws because he said something about slavery being bad and you have to have a law against it, but he used hypothetically about just because my neighbor has a slave doesn't mean... he said something, and they took that out of context, and it sounded really bad. He did that for another one with women, and he was saying the exact opposite. They took it out of context and made him out to be the biggest racist bigot on the planet. But because he was a radio host and people around here knew, they didn't believe it, and it actually backfired on him.
That happens a lot.
But that's not factual. That is a lie, flat out lie.
Right. I agree with you. When you say something that's a lie, it will backfire. Let me give you an example. In 1980, when Jimmy Carter was going down and he got desperate, he actually said this. I've never seen a presidential race where a presidential candidate, much less a sitting president, actually said something this negative. He said, if Ronald Reagan is elected, North will be pitted against South, Jew against Christian, and black against white. And even people that were against Reagan, they knew that was so crazy that it totally backfired on him.
Well, but that's what the Democrats do now. They say that, and maybe that was part of the backfiring, they make Republicans completely into bigots and whatever. And people are like, well, wait a minute. Just because I'm an independent, but I'm like, well, just because you're into small government or you're into free markets doesn't automatically make you a bigot.
But you know what? It doesn't work. And like you said, that kind of stuff backfires. If you're against, like, gay marriage, you're a homophobe. If you're against abortion, you're a sexist against women. They've tried that. It doesn't work. Like you said, most of the time it does backfire, and you do have to be fairly accurate to have some kind of credibility. Now, you do have situations sometimes, but they're very rare, where somebody will send out a mailing that'll get to the voters the Saturday before the election with something completely crazy in it that the other person doesn't have time to respond because it's 2-3 days before the election. You get that once in a while. What they call I forgot the term they use for it, but most of the time those really outrageous things, like I said, John McCain had fathered black children. I mean, there were all kinds of crazy stuff going around. The stuff about George W. Bush that Dan Rather put out there, he got fired because he said something false about George W. Bush. So if you come up with something that's totally wrong, I mean false, most of the time it's going to backfire. Now, sometimes it does work. Bill Clinton, when he was campaigning in '92, said about Jerry Brown, who was his opponent, that he's against making Jerusalem the capital of Israel. He was kowtowing to the Jewish voters. And that, unfortunately, just put a seed of a doubt into certain ethnic groups' head. Even though the next day he apologized and said it's not true, people still had it in their head, and I think it helped Clinton a little with the Jewish voters. But for the most part, when you say something that's totally outrageous, like Obama, like all this, I'll give you a great example. In 2012, if you remember, a lot of right-wingers were saying that Barack Obama was not a Christian, he was a Muslim. That's factually a lie. Now, you can say he's sympathetic to Muslims and doesn't think much of Christianity, but he's technically a Christian. When they were saying that he's a member of Al-Qaeda, they were saying all kinds of crazy stuff, and it all backfired. And what he was able to do during the debate against Romney would say something, and Obama would say, you know what, my political opponents, also that he wasn't born in this country, another lie, that he was born in Kenya when he was born in Honolulu, and his birth certificate was doctored or fake. So what Obama did, which was brilliant in that debate, was anytime Romney gave him a legitimate criticism, he came back and said, you know what, my opponents say the craziest crap, like I wasn't born here, I'm not a Christian. You can't believe anything they say. So when you do something like that, where you give a false allegation, it ends up muting the legitimate, making the legitimate criticism sound bad too. If you say, oh, look at all the stuff that they've been saying about me. And Obama was very good at deflecting legitimate criticism, because some of the far right was saying some of the craziest things imaginable about him.
Well, hit jobs seem to be commonplace right now. I mean, Trump seems like he's experiencing a major hit job, just one continuous hit job.
That's right.
And they're just making up facts. I mean, the whole Russia narrative, state governments are probably hacking into our systems all the time, but they turned it into, they completely set up the election, and people don't believe it for the most part. I think there probably are some that believe it, but for the most part, people don't believe it. So that's what I'm talking about. The hit jobs are coming to be a commonplace now. And what do you think about that? Because I don't remember it being this bad.
No, I'll tell you why.
Hey, wait, you're going to answer that question again, but keep from going forward and backwards, because your face, it's like all face and then you're framed and then all face, and you're going to be disappointed in how it turns out. Okay, go ahead. Answer that question.
The last presidential election was particularly negative because both candidates had very high negatives. Both Trump and Hillary had about 60% negative. So the problem was, to reach the voters to get you to vote for either one of them, they couldn't say anything positive about their own. They had to attack the other one. So the voters were sort of in their minds choosing between two evils. Trump ended up winning because in the end, people wanted change. And Hillary, like I said, she said, I'm going to be a third term of Obama. Whereas Trump was the equivalent of a third-party candidate, really, if you think about it, because the Republican establishment didn't like him either. People just wanted drastic change. And the country, you're right, has become much more polarized. If you remember 20, 30 years ago, the most popular TV show, political show, it was on CNN, was Crossfire with Pat Buchanan and Mike Kingsley. People really wanted to hear very articulate, smart arguments from both sides. They don't want that anymore. On Fox, they got rid of Alan Colmes with Hannity and Colmes because people just wanted to hear one side. And on MSNBC, they only want to hear the one side. People want to be preached to the choir. And unfortunately, that's what's polarized the country and has caused the politicians to get reelected. They've had to go to those extremes, whereas most of them really are, moderate, either the Republicans and the Democrats. And you have your extremists on both sides. But to appeal to get reelected, they have to appeal to those people, because the people on both political extremes, those are the ones that get passionate. Those are the ones that vote. Those are the ones that organize. Those are the ones that you have to kowtow to, either from the left or the right. And so that's why, for some reason, it started under George W. Bush with Iraq, and then it continued under Obama, where both presidents didn't really work that much with the other party. Whereas if you go back and you remember Ronald Reagan getting great stuff done with Tip O'Neill and Dan Rostenkowski, Bill Clinton getting great stuff done with Bob Dole and Newt Gingrich, you just don't have that anymore. I was kind of hoping we still might have it. Trump and Chuck Schumer are friends going back to New York 30 years. So maybe they'll, I think I'm kind of hopeful that they could reach some kind of compromises.
Well, Alex Jones and others in the media have really been targets. So now they're not only going after politicians, but they're going after media personalities. So what do you think of that? I mean, it's like it's everybody's fair game right now.
I think it's counterproductive. President Trump, I think, is making a mistake calling, like you said, personally calling stuff fake news and personally going after certain people. But
you have to admit there is a lot of fake news. I mean, he's right in a lot of cases. I mean, they've like proven that a lot of the stuff that they're bringing forward is just not even true, or like what's going on in the Middle East, or that's so vanilla that it's not true from a lack of talking about it. Black, everything's dark. Go ahead.
No, you're right, but you can communicate that in a way without using a term like fake news. In other words, you say, you know what, this is not true, and explain it intelligently and calmly instead of just name calling.
Yeah, but he didn't. Did he start the fake news meme, or was it started more? Because I don't think it was started by him. I think he continued it and repeated it, but maybe he did. I don't know.
To my knowledge, no presidential candidate has ever used that word. Now, he could say it's misleading or it's out of context, and let me correct it. But when you're name calling on either side, I don't think it helps your case. But I can see what the president's doing. He's solidifying his base, and most of the people do not trust the media. And he did win the election using that same strategy. So maybe he's slyer than you think. It's hard to tell.
I don't know.
I don't know yet. He's only been in for 6 months. After a year, then we'll know if it's working or not. You can't judge his presidency yet. It's way too early.
Well, in your time doing your work, you worked a lot on negative campaigns for Clintons. Are you surprised that they have not been convicted of any crimes at this point? I mean, because there's been so much dirt. And if you listen to the other side, they'll say it's all been debunked and it's all fake. But I mean, I have a hard time believing everything is fake. I've been blasted by people telling me that I'm clueless because all this stuff has been debunked on the Clintons, but I don't believe that. I've seen too much. So what do you think?
Here's what I think, what I know. Whether or not they're guilty of anything, they're not going to jail, okay? It's not going to happen, okay? So I have to deal with reality. You want to deal with fantasy, and your callers want to deal with fantasy. I don't deal with that. I have to deal with reality. Her career is over. His career is over. They're not going to jail. By the way, as a general rule, when a politician in high office does something really bad, just resigning or being gone is enough. They don't go after them. Spiro Agnew, for instance, could have gone to jail for 30 years for taking bribes. The guy was stupid enough. He was taking bribes as governor of Maryland. Then he becomes vice president, continues to take bribes. He just quietly resigned. And the Clintons have quietly, they're not relevant anymore. So to talk about prosecuting them is just a waste of time instead of dealing with the reality of what's actually happening in real life.
Well, if they have done really, really, really bad crimes, people feel that it's really hypocritical to allow somebody who's done a really bad crime to get off when somebody down the street got caught smoking marijuana and now they're in prison for 2 years.
But again, that's the reality of politics and politicians. If they either resign, like Barney.
So there's two standards. If you're powerful, you can get away with murder. You can get away with drug trafficking. You can get away with
not only that,
pedophilia. But if you're not powerful and you smoke weed, you're in prison.
We have to deal with the reality of it.
And that's what I'm talking about. This is the reality.
Okay. The reality is they're not going to go to jail. It's just not going to happen. Even if they committed all these crimes you talk about. If you look at Bill Clinton's first term in office, you take out the sexual problems with Paula Jones, with Jennifer Flowers, with Monica. You look at all of those scandals. He was beset by scandal from day one till the end.
In your research, can I ask you? In your research, did he do it?
No, let me finish my point, please.
Okay.
It's an important point. You look at every other scandal Clinton was hit with: the FBI files, the travel office, cattle futures, Whitewater, Vince Foster's body being moved. Bill Clinton had nothing to do with any of that. It was all Hillary. Okay, all of it. Bill Clinton never lied about policy. He lied about sex. He said, I'm going to end welfare as we know it. He said the era of big government is over, and he balanced the budget. He was a decent, honest man on policy. The dirty stuff that really happened under his administration, it was all Hillary. So, but even having said that, and the other stuff she did, that might have been illegal when she was Secretary of State and with the emails, all that, it doesn't matter. We have to move past that. If you're going to just harp on trying to put in jail your political enemy who has no power right now and is the media doesn't care about her, nobody cares about her, you're going to end up looking petty. You're going to end up looking
from a political standpoint. But when if she is a mass murderer,
she's not a mass murderer, so I'm not.
Okay, I just want to know what crimes did she really commit?
It doesn't matter. She's gone, and whether she committed,
So should we go and let a lot of criminals out of jail then, out of prison? Oh, because it's not fair.
That's a terrible analogy.
Why?
Because Hillary Clinton has not been found guilty of any crime.
Because they don't go after her. They have so much evidence, but they're not. Well, that's my point. You're a hitman, so you should know. You looked into that. You know what the truth is, and that's what I'm asking you about.
The answer is we only use the negative stuff if it'll have some kind of positive.
So who cares? Because politics is more important than what is goodness.
No, it's not going to. It's only going to make.
I just don't want criminals in office. Period. I want it cleaned up.
You repeatedly called, and I can't believe I'm defending Hillary Clinton because I can't stand her. Okay, and the way that
I'm asking if you know it's not true, then tell me. You had the dirt. You know what's true, so I'm asking you.
I know that she has not been convicted of any criminal crimes, and nobody cares anymore except for the far right. And plus, even if
I know my neighbor has bodies in his backyard and he did it 10 years ago, I still care that he goes to prison because he's still going to be able to do more dirty deeds.
But Hillary Clinton will not be able to do any more dirty. She's finished in politics. Just Let's move on and deal with what, if you have any Democrats in office.
So you're
today,
telling me that her dirty deeds weren't that bad, so we don't have to worry about it.
I just told you that in Clinton's first term, all those scandals were dirty stuff that she did. So I'm not saying she's not dirty, but politically and realistically, and in the reality world, not the fantasy world, it doesn't do anything.
Reality world is people with power don't go to prison, and people who don't do. That's what I'm saying, and you keep denying that. That's what I'm saying. And if that's our reality, fine. But I'm trying to get to that point.
Look. Guy that robs a 7-Eleven of $10 goes to jail for 10 years because it's considered violent crime. But Ken Lay and white-collar criminals do 6 months in Club Fed. That's outrageous, but you know what? That's our system. And if it was up to me, I would federalize white-collar crimes. Ken
Lay died of a heart attack and lost his reputation. He actually suffered quite a bit. Because
he didn't. You know why? Because he had himself killed before the appeals process took over, so his family could keep all those houses.
Yeah, that's crappy.
Okay, what?
That's crappy.
It's totally true. And not only that, there were like 50 defendants in the Enron case, and only 4 of them saw jail time, average of like 5 years, and consider thousands of people.
This is why you're getting at the meat of why people are pissed in this country. This is the crux of why people are just pissed off.
Watch American Greed any night of the week, and you'll see these guys who ruin millions of people's lives and do 3 months in Club Fed. That's just the way our system is.
Well, but that's why people are angry. And if we don't start making some kind of amends for people, I'm telling you, it's just the ethics in this country people who have power can't get away with just whatever they want, whereas the peons are going to prison for almost nothing. You know, Matt Taibbi in Rolling Stone wrote this whole thing about that, and he's absolutely right. Now, he's on the far left. That's what I'm saying. People on all different political spectrums, no matter where they are, all coming together and going, this is not right.
Okay. I'd like to respond to that.
Go ahead.
Glad you brought that up, because after the Alzheimer's issue that we're doing, the next issue that we're going to do is have the banks that got those corrupt banks that got all that bailout money, they're going to have to give some of that bailout money to victims of white-collar crime. And that's another thing. We've polled it. 95% of the public agrees with it. Almost all of Congress will vote for it. And that would straighten that. That would at least show a signal that the government cares about people. Why are we bailing out corrupt banks, and not one person did a day in jail for that whole scandal? And
thank you. Yes.
And the people that got screwed with Enron and Bernie Madoff, the government doesn't give them one penny. This is disgusting, and makes America look like a joke. Do you know, out of 33 Western democracies, take a guess, where would you think America is in terms of the average net worth of the average family out of the 33 Western democracies? And keep in mind, we have the highest GDP in the world, higher than all of the European Union put together.
So we're talking more the median, because the average goes way up because we got these really wealthy.
Oh, no, I'm talking about the average.
Okay.
Compared to out of 33 countries, what do you think?
33.
You're close, 29th, which means the average family in Canada, in England, in Luxembourg, in Italy, in Germany, in France, they're living better than us, and we have so much more money than. And the only person, I can't believe I'm saying this, the only person that actually had the pulse on that, he didn't have the right answer, was Bernie Sanders, if you remember, who was talking about how all the wealth is conglomerated on a very. Now, his socialistic answers, I don't think, are the answers, but
policy is different, but the problems are being identified by all spectrums of the political.
He saw what the real problem is in America. He was the only one that really put his finger on that. And what's ironic is that both Hillary and Donald Trump have been doesn't make them bad people, but they've been beneficiaries of this system, where the rich pay no taxes sometimes. It's not Donald Trump's fault. He's just playing by the rules. The same thing with Hillary. So, but
I don't know about that. They're all playing by the rules, but okay, we can go with that for now.
Those are the rules. I've had years where I've made a lot of money and paid no taxes too. So that's just
if I can make the rule, if I can bend the rules and hide behind the rules, then maybe I guess you're following the rules, but they're not the rules for the average everyday person. And that's what's making people angry.
No,
but I would have to say your question about the average, it's even worse than that. Then that's why I brought up the median, because there's a difference between median and average, and our average is made a lot higher because we have so many top wealthy people. And so that means we're in worse situation than people realize. But go ahead.
That's true. And also, the only ones behind us of these countries are the former Soviet bloc countries and Mexico. All our friends in Western democracy, Western democratic countries are doing better financially than we are, and that's a disgrace and disgusting. And I'm hoping both parties can get together and fix this. But
it's a bipartisan issue, and it's the whole put American first thing. You know, Trump did that slogan. Let's hope he means it. You know, Bernie Sanders put American first. I mean, you could have put that slogan on either one of them. The whole point is that we have to put our people first, because at some point it's our tax money, it's our community. It's not just those tiny fraction of people's whole country. It's all of our country. And if you don't get your act together, people are getting mad, and they should be angry when these are the situations.
Well, it happened, like I said before, under Presidents Reagan and Clinton. They did do great stuff for regular people because the two parties worked together. Today they're just so polarized. I just want to say again, I want to put in just another for our organization.
We got a little bit more time. We could talk. Let's talk another 8 minutes or so, and then we'll talk about your Alzheimer's. I promise you'll get your Alzheimer's in here. But let me talk about a couple things that you're going to be really uncomfortable about. And I sent you the questions, but I want to hear your thing. You've done a lot of work, and you won't tell me, and maybe you won't on this either. There's a lot of people coming forward saying that pedophilia is a problem with politicians. Is that something your research found? And what do you think about that?
It's pretty rare. The thing with Dennis Hastert was a shock, because what was interesting about it, kind of ironic. If you remember, when Gingrich was forced to retire, Bob Livingston became Speaker, and Larry Flint found all this stuff on him, so he had to retire. And the Republicans had to go 20 or 30 people down the food chain to find a clean person on sex, and they found Denny Hastert. So nobody knew about. He's a pedophile. I think he might be in jail now, or he went to jail for that, for something he did as a gym teacher 30, 40 years ago. That's not something that we look for. If it comes up, we'll find it if there's any.
So you don't really know, because you're not looking for that.
You don't look for any particular thing. You find what's there. Okay. You don't. Now, although sometimes if you know for a fact, like any governor or any state legislator or any congressman is going to vote for some tax hikes, you look for those, obviously. You look for votes for more big government, for wasteful spending and things like that. You know, you're going to find that with any person. With any prosecutor, you're going to find bad plea bargains where a person went out and committed another crime like Willie Horton. That's just you do look for stuff like that. But for the most part, we just look at their record, and whatever comes up, comes up. We're not specifically looking, unless we've been tipped off, this guy did this, look for that specifically.
Well, what other things have you noticed that the general public may not be aware of? I mean, you know a lot more than you're sharing right now. So I want to know what other things are the pub.
Can you be specific? What am I not sharing?
Oh, I don't know. I would think that you would know a lot more, being somebody that was constantly digging up dirt on people. I would think that you would know a lot. And
okay, I'll give you an example. Answer your question. In my book, Confessions of a Political Hitman, I was the first person ever to tell the public why Bill Clinton was impeached in the House but not removed in the Senate. Because Clinton, like J. Edgar Hoover, had sexual dirt on all these senators. And I go in my book and I pick out each senator. Here's what he had in Al D'Amato. Here's what he had in Orrin Hatch. Here's what he had on Fred Thompson, etc. And there were some Democrats in there too.
But that's how politics works, right? I mean, isn't that what's going on all over the place?
And it did not remove him, even though they had him dead to rights, committing 2 felonies, lying to Congress and suborning perjury, obstruction of justice with his secretary. So that's why he was not removed in the Senate, is because Clinton had a lot of sexual dirt on Republicans. And of course, the Republicans, it comes out worse because they look more like hypocrites because they're spouting family values. So
they do. Yeah, they do. If they're spouting family values and they're doing that, go ahead.
In '94, when I first started, like I told you, when we won Congress for the first time since like the 1920s. We had 53 freshmen, Republicans. I believe 10 of them were divorced after 1 year because these guys were regular guys that year, like plumbers and electricians and real estate agents. Then all of a sudden, they go to Washington. If you're a congressman, you're a rock star. I don't care how you look, and you could be 500 pounds like Quasimodo. You're going to have every woman after you. And good people get caught up in that. And we had 10, I believe it was 10 freshmen. It's in my book. I don't remember exactly, of our freshmen and many of them ran on family values type stuff. Like during the whole impeachment thing, I'm wondering, why is Newt Gingrich so quiet? Why is he not attacking Bill Clinton? And of course, on Election Day, 1998, he resigns. People thought it was because we lost houses in the House. I mean, we lost seats in the House. It wasn't why. It was because he was fooling around with his receptionist, who's now his wife, while his other wife was, in Georgia. And the thing with his first wife dying of cancer, and he's having sex with the nurse or whatever it was. But anyway,
I, for one, I got to tell you, I don't think that somebody who goes after dirt on some of these politicians are necessarily a bad guy. I think if you don't use it for real, if you spin it and you make crap up and all that stuff, I think that's bad. But understanding the bad part of people, especially when Congress is a complete swamp, I think that's something we need to do more of right now, but not in the way that they're doing it.
I have a whole chapter in the book which has quotes of different historians that explain that you have negative campaigning. It's part of democracy. If you can't say, as long as it's true, as long as you're not, like you said, exaggerating or spinning or saying lies. If you say Governor so-and-so raised taxes this many times, this person voted for more welfare spending this many times, or this person had a DUI, it's totally legitimate. I mean, look what happened to George W. Bush. He was 6 points ahead with 5 days to go, and then the DUI story came out, and his 6-point lead became a 0-point lead. In fact, he lost the popular vote by 2 points. That was because of the DUI.
It is what it is. I mean, if you did something, people want people of integrity in office.
Yeah, and we had the right to know that. And like I said, if you don't have negative campaigning, what's the difference between our elections and Cuba?
But it needs to be real. It needs to be real. Like what they did against Jason Lewis here, that was not right.
No, but you said it backfired, right?
It did backfire. So that's great. And I want that stuff to backfire. Yeah.
Legitimate criticism generally works. Illegitimate criticism rarely does work. So it's a positive thing you have to put in our democratic process. If you want an educated voter to make an educated choice, they have the right. They might not care about a person's sex life, like with Bill Clinton, but they still need to know. Now, most of the public with Clinton, if you remember, didn't care, but they still had the right to know. It shows you how much the country had changed. Jimmy Carter lost 20 points in the polls because he admitted having sexual fantasies. Playboy.
Gosh, I think now if a guy doesn't admit to it, they probably think he's, I don't know. He's crazy. I think it would backfire. Yeah, if you say you don't have fantasies, then you won't get voted on. I don't know.
Nelson Rockefeller, who would have been a good president, ran 3 times. You know why he lost? Because he was divorced. That was a huge scandal. When Ronald Reagan became the first divorced president, did anybody care? The times have changed.
Well, they've changed a lot, though. Now I think I'm out of my comfort zone with how far things have changed in some of the things, and it's hurting families and communities and all sorts. We don't even care about people anymore. And let's get into your Alzheimer's. I think that's why this is me out of my comfort zone. We don't care about people anymore. And if I'm getting what I want, I don't care if somebody at a distance is being hurt. You got to start saying, I care. Okay, I'm getting what I want, but I care that this person's being abused. I'm not being abused, but that person is, so let's fight that. And that's what's missing. And I see that with my own children. As long as that kid's being taken care of, they don't care if there's a coach who's abusing other kids because their kid's being treated great. Well, no. If a coach is abusive, let's get rid of the coach. I don't care if it's my kid or somebody else's kid. And this gets to the Alzheimer's thing.
Right. Well, you remember Romney got in trouble because he gave this off-the-cuff remark. He didn't know he was being filmed, where he said people, they want their pork, but they don't want anybody else. That's just unfortunately the way it is. But I want to go back to the Alzheimer's thing. Like I said before, there has been a complete ignoring of Alzheimer's victims for 20 years. And even today, in the last 3 years, they've given pretty good bumps in spending, but it's still far less than half of HIV. And there's over 100 times more people with Alzheimer's that have HIV. And by the way, this is not in any way to criticize HIV spending. They've done incredible things. I mean, miraculous. The cocktail is basically a cure. And thanks to Obamacare, one of the good things it did do, it gave that cocktail to every person with HIV. So they've done incredible things with their money, but we haven't gotten the funding for Alzheimer's to even, like I said, even have an effective treatment. Whereas, like I said, not just HIV, but cancer, leukemia, there's treatments. So we have to be much more aggressive. Just like if you remember the HIV lobby in the beginning, they were so aggressive. They got down in the trenches. We have to be like them. And some of the congressmen and senators I talk to, some of them, they say, well, where are you going to get the money from? Because we want to raise spending from $1 billion to $3 billion, for instance. It's about $2 billion. So if they're a Republican, and if they're a Democrat, and they say, where are you going to get the money from? We can't spend more money for the deficit. We got to take it out of something else. I respond to a Democrat, when you voted for Obamacare, you didn't say where the money's coming from. You just blew up the deficit because you believe it was the right thing. And if it's a Republican, I say you believed in Reagan's defense spending, which blew up the deficit, and his tax cuts because it was the right thing to do, going into trillions of dollars. How dare you talk about $2 billion raise? If you remember when Head Start first came out, their great argument, which worked, was every dollar spent on Head Start, I've known that it's true, saves $2. Well, I can tell you, because, like I said before, the baby boomers, when we hit senior citizen status, there will not be enough money in Medicare or Medicaid. So I can make that same argument. Whatever you're spending on Alzheimer's now will save money down the road.
Well, I think, with aging, we're going to be solving aging in the next couple decades. And I'd be really curious if the solving the aging, if that really helps with Alzheimer's, or if now we end up having more people with Alzheimer's. It's something really to look into. And maybe what they're finding with aging might be a help with the cure of Alzheimer's. I think there could be some of that crossover research.
Yeah, and also they're looking in other countries on preventative things before you have Alzheimer's.
Exactly.
We don't do that here. We need to be doing what they did for the research on cancer, the research on HIV. We need to be doing as aggressive on Alzheimer's victims. And like I said, I'm being a broken record. More than 100 times Americans have Alzheimer's and have HIV, yet we're spending much more money on HIV. And again, not that the HIV, they deserve that money. They've done great things with it. But we're just asking for a $2 billion bump from $1 billion to $3 billion, which is what HIV gets. We're just asking for the same bump. And 95% of the public agrees with us, and the members of Congress, like I said, most of them agree with us, but the NIH, but here's the scam they pulled. Why
don't they agree with you?
Yeah, because they're morons.
Besides being morons, what is their argument?
Here's their argument. I swear to God, I got an email when I was lobbying Congress over this. I went to the NIH. I thought they'd be reasonable. Here's the scam they pulled. They put all the Alzheimer's money in this thing called the Division of Aging, which has very strict limits. But people with cancer, most of them are old, but they're not in division. So they say, well, we can't go any farther. So the other thing, they actually sent me the head of the NIH, who we're going to try very hard to have President Trump remove this person, because he has been blocking this and blocking the good congressman for the last 10 years. They actually had their public affairs person send me an email, and I have it physically, which said to spend more money on Alzheimer's spending research would be akin to hiring a physics professor to teach first grade mathematics. That's the contempt that they have for Alzheimer's victims.
Can you give me that letter and I'll put it up on the screen during that period in the video?
Yes, it's disgusting. Okay. To show that kind of contempt for your own senior citizens, where most countries, they revere their senior citizen, and most people in America revere, but the politician...
No, I don't know if we do. That's part of me being out of our comfort zone. We're not revering the people who we should be.
Congress has really tried, at least over the last 3-4 years that I know of, but they keep getting stymied by the NIH. They're like these nameless, faceless bureaucrats in Bethesda. And we're going to try very hard to lobby. We're not only going to lobby the Congress to put more spending. We're going to lobby the president to put an executive order, which would help him politically, because there's no state in the country where it would hurt him because you have a lot of older people. Our older population is expanding because people are living longer. And I'm hoping to get the president and Senator Schumer, who does support us, to go together on this. And like I said, it's not even a bipartisan; it's a nonpartisan issue. There's not one congressman that's going to come out publicly and say, yeah.
Perfect. I mean, that's what we need. We need to be looking at those things. Yeah, send me that letter. I'm going to put it up on screen. And thank you so much for joining us today. It's really good timing with this Hitman stuff.
Alzheimer'sLivesMatter.org.
Okay, I'll have that up on the screen for people to see as well. Have a great day. Thank you for joining us.
Very much. I appreciate it.
That's all we have today, folks. I want to remind you about my Patreon account. Not looking to make a fortune, but if we could get our costs covered, that would be awesome. And maybe make a little bit of money so that we can, invest in improving the videos and things. I am really wanting to turn a few of these into documentaries. And if I can get more money coming in, then I would use that money for that purpose. I'm trying to plan some of that stuff out. There are some really, really good content that I have that would turn into amazing documentaries that people really need to hear. So anything that you could give to help in that way, I would really appreciate it. Again, my Patreon account is just Sarah Westall. So if you look for that, you'll find it. And of course, all my shows are up on sarahwestall.com. You'll be able to find all the episodes and up on YouTube. And again, if you have any suggestions or anything that people that you'd like to hear on my Patreon account, I'm really welcoming people to share that and to be involved on the kinds of content and people that you want to hear. So for now, I hope everybody has an amazing day.